Is Nikki Banks, and I'm offering reflections on the white paper that I submitted on diversity and law enforcement, looking at emerging issues and themes that human resource departments and organizations will have to deal with or are currently dealing with in the 21st century and beyond. Um, I looked at the issue of diversity training in law enforcement because it is something that is very close to me. I'm currently in the capacity as department chair of the Criminal Justice Department at Grand Rapids Community College, and I literally oversee a police academy that produces law enforcement for our community and for extending communities. And so, as a woman of color, as a black woman, it rests heavy on my heart. In ensuring that we are doing all that we can to make sure that those that we produce have hearts to serve and not to harm. Because we recognize that over the past few years especially, the veil has been lifted off of the field of criminal justice, specifically off of law enforcement with technology and various social media forms. And so individuals now can see directly into the work that we do, whether it's through a cam quarter that or a police cam that law enforcement has on their person or a cell phone by the average citizen taping what they see unfolding in front of them. And so there's some things that need to take place, that need to happen in order for us to right some wrongs on our end, on the end of law enforcement and the criminal justice field as a whole. I noted in my paper, in my introduction, that we are in a crisis because we have literally watched as a nation law enforcement take the lives specifically of black men, unarmed black men in our communities and not be brought to justice. And the fault is ours. And as an entity, as a law enforcement entity, we have to accept responsibility for that. But I'll touch on that in a few moments. Anderson and Hendricks note that it is the responsibility of law enforcement to attain the skills needed to more effectively engage with the public, in particular with minority populations. As I unpacked just a brief overview of history in terms of law enforcement in our nation, we recognize that it is rooted in white supremacy. It is rooted in slavery in terms of how we have worked through this and worked out law enforcement. And it's not to say that the entire system or field of law enforcement is corrupt, but we definitely need to take ownership and onus of the fact that we need to make some significant changes because laws that we have in place that should be quelling some of the behavior, some of the negative behavior that's rooted in racial discrimination towards certain populations in our country is not doing it. And so we recognize as a training academy, a very training academy that produces those who are viable for hire must be or has a significant stake in all of this. Some of the cost of lack of training, Shinwar et al. Asserts that in the 21st century, blacks are fighting for the right to live while black in the United States due to continued abuse at the hands of law enforcement. The damage done to an individual citizen, potentially in the taking of their life, to the devastation that it causes community with the continued lack of trust, on to being harmful to organizations that in turn hire these individuals is costly. And it's time that we do something about this. When I looked at this issue from a theoretical premise, it really boils down to us tapping into psychological theories, ones that are rooted in the ability to seek to focus on an individual's ability to and desire to develop socially responsible behaviors. Yes, we take an oath, but it doesn't mean that that person has been equipped or has even bought into the fact that they need to make some changes, that they need to accept the fact that they come to the table with certain biases that could potentially play out and be harmful to the very persons that they say that they're there to serve. And so, we recognize that there's work to do. The call to action, because I recognize my time is short, the call to action is that law enforcement training agencies and law enforcement agencies have to stand up and say and recognize and take the stance that we are the ones that produce the officers. So the work must begin with us in terms of putting into position a form of training, diversity training, cultural competence training that will ensure that individuals that come through our doors, that cross our sands, that cross us, have been vetted, have been trained, have been equipped to better serve the communities that we send them out into, that their biases have been checked, that they have been changed. In closing, I noted that as Christians, we are charged in Mark 12:30 and 31 in the Great Commandment to be Christ-like in loving our neighbor as ourselves. I earnestly believe that in order to accomplish this, one must be willing to engage with others in healthy relationship, to learn of them and grow in appreciation of and ultimately love their neighbor. It has been clearly shown that law enforcement has not done its part in honoring black males and other people of color in a fair and just way in this nation, and it's time out for us to own that truth and to do better. Thank you.